Welcome to the Online Success Journey Podcast, your opportunity to discover and learn from entrepreneurs like yourself. This is not your typical podcast, but a place where you can get the real story and find out how real people encounter speed bumps and detours, but journey through to find success. Now here's your host for the Online Success Journey Podcast, Patience.
Hello everyone and welcome to Online Success Journey. This is episode 114. Are you ready to join the clan? Today we have Gabriella Salmon, the founder of Free to Achieve and a coach. Her passion is helping people to be the best version of themselves without taking 20 to 30 years like her friends and colleagues have. Hello Gabriella.
Hi Patience, how are you?
I'm great. How are you this morning?
Good, thank you. Could be warmer, but we're great.
Don't worry, summer will be coming soon. I know the clan is anxious to hear your story. So let's get started with the basics. Can you tell my clan a little bit about your background, about what you did before you started your own online business?
Yes, look, I started off working in the accounting field and I stayed there for about 8 or 9 years. And one day I realized I just had enough. And instinctively, I just yelled out to one of my managers and said, look, I need to be working around people. And at the time I was working for an international recruitment company. And my manager introduced me to a recruiter and I went for an interview and I got a job as a recruiter. And from there, I realized I really enjoyed working with people a lot, helping people out find their job. And then when I'd had enough of that, I thought, what else could I do with my life? So I went and worked on projects in the recruitment firm. And from there, I realized I enjoyed projects. So for me, finding my ideal career or where I fit in was really hit and miss. So I then thought, look, why don't I give management consulting a go? So I worked in the management consulting field for a number of years on various projects relating to people. So people change projects, technology projects which still involved people. And I found that what really intrigued me the most about people was behaviours. So there was a bit of a theme happening for me around what I actually enjoyed doing. And I found that I was pretty good at listening to people's problems and helping them navigate their way around their concerns or fears. So basically, when that job came to an end through a downturn in the consulting market, I was lost for a number of years. I didn't know where to turn. I felt like recruitment companies didn't even understand my skills back in 2002. So I really had to work hard at trying to define myself. And that took a number of years and it was hit and miss, of course. And and along the way you get frustrated, you feel demoralized, nobody really understands you in terms of what skills you have to offer, because quite often when you used to come out of management consulting firms, some of those skills weren't the norm, if you like. So back in 2002, if you talked about working in change management or working on process improvement projects, it wasn't really something recruiters understood back then. So it was a very demoralizing time, I found, for myself going through that whole job hunting process. But so I took little contracts along the way, and what I'd learned through chance was that I met somebody who was a coach using emotional freedom technique and some neuro-linguistic programming techniques. And essentially, we spoke about some of my goals and why I wasn't achieving what I wanted in terms of personal goals and work goals. And he took me through a remarkable process of releasing any negative belief systems I was holding around getting work or any negative feelings that I was holding on to. Because the way this person explained it to me was, he said, they're what you called your emotional blocks, and therefore you can't attract what it is you desire. So I continued taking consulting roles, and I worked in change management for a number of years. But on the side, I set up a coaching business back in 2009, helping other people attract their life partner and achieve their work goals as well. Because when I started working with people's subconscious mind, it became so exhilarating for me to be able to help people from all walks of life. I would have young children come see me. I would have adults. I would have a lot of abused women who'd been down the conventional path of healing, and it didn't work a great deal. And so for me, it was just fantastic being able to help people. And one day I happened to go along to a change management seminar, and I met a man who talked about change management, the way it was done in organisations, and people feeling disgruntled at work. And the fact still, when we look at today's statistics, or when we look at the Gallup statistics, we've got 87% of people that are either not engaged or actively disengaged. So, you know, for me, that was like, wow, you know, how do we turn this around? Because I'd worked in the corporate setting for 25 odd years, I saw disgruntled people. I saw how people weren't happy at work. I saw how they were actively disengaging. They were undermining great initiatives. They didn't want to collaborate. They would do anything to sabotage any project or initiative that their manager or the organisation had going. And so I'd experienced this firsthand, as well as myself not really feeling fulfilled in my role. And what this particular person introduced me to was a process where you have your talents assessed and you start unlocking people's talents. So then it would be able to give people about 5 desired roles. It would also look at the tasks based on talents. It would give them the desired work environment, their ideal culture for them, the type of manager that they would feel comfortable with, and also it would empower people to ask the right types of interview questions. So not only would they get an ideal role fit, that they would also get a better fit with manager, because after doing all the research, we know that people don't necessarily leave their job, but they leave their manager because they're not feeling valued. So this is just flipping and turning everything around that we've ever learnt about in my generation, where you just go to work, you get a degree, you work hard, end of story.
Wow, what a journey, Gabriella. Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Well, back in 2012, when I walked through this process and sat the assessment, it was like I had an awakening, right? And finally, I felt like, I totally get what my talents are. I get where I fit into this world. I get why I behave a particular way. I understand why others behave a particular way. So it gave me another layer of rich information around my behaviours, other people's behaviours, and those talents, and why those talents are so important, because it made me realise why people were so unhappy. And so from there, I was able to help more people. So when I look at, you know, what are my talents, what are my passions that I was born with, and where would I be happiest and healthiest the most, was when I looked at my report after I sat this particular process, because of the accuracy level it had. Has 91% plus accuracy level. It's measuring my hardwired behaviour. So I felt like I could really rely on the data, because it just resonated. And so then I started to trial it with some of my friends and colleagues, and they all came back to me with amazing feedback, and they were blown away by the accuracy levels, and they started to make career changes themselves, even though some of them are in their 50s. You know, it gave them a new lease on life, and finally they felt free to be themselves. And I thought, okay, how can I use the talents that I've been given in the most productive way, in the way that's going to make me feel happy and fulfilled? And I'm all about helping people. I'm all about mentoring people, supporting people, helping people be at their best. I'm all about facilitating emotional conversations with people. And what I really loved about it was that there was a science behind what I was actually doing. It was a proven method. The product had been around since 2001. It's used across 127 countries in the world. So I felt like, okay, not only do I have something that explains who I am really well and it explains to other people who they are, but it gives people so much hope without spending 20 or 30 years in jobs that they hate. Because what I found in all the corporate work was people would say, I'm here because I've got to pay the mortgage. What else would I do with my life? I don't know what else to do. And the levels of stress they were experiencing or angst that they were feeling in the workplace. And because my natural nature is to help people, I found myself being the natural listener or the natural workplace counsellor sometimes for people. So that's why I do what I do, Patient.
Let's put man aside because you have been in business for a while now. How did you know your business was successful?
For me, it was about the word of mouth. The word of mouth, after people experience the process, for me, it was about the fact that the word would spread. People would share it with their family and friends, say, hey, you've really got to do this. You've really got to do this. So that was a feeling of success, if you like. The fact that I work for myself and one of my core values is freedom, and I feel liberated and far more happier. That for me defines success. I felt like finally I'm in my skin, I'm at home. That's how I felt. I felt like my soul's at home. So that's what defines success for me.
Why are the talents you are born with sentimental by the age of 3? I don't remember what I was doing at the age of 3, but I remember my late grandmother told me I was so naughty, and my late mother also was really hard with it. So I don't know by 3 if we know what we are doing. Please explain.
Yeah, sure. Look, we don't know. You're right. You're absolutely right, Patience. We don't know what we're doing at 3. All the process assesses the hardwired behaviours. And so what's cemented in by age 3 are your hardwired behaviours. So how you respond to the world. So for example, do you have natural levels of patience or compassion? Okay, these are what you call hardwired behaviours. Do you find yourself getting frustrated? Do you are you more social? Are you more outgoing? So you'll start to see these behaviours emerge, okay? So a child that is more outgoing as opposed to somebody that likes to spend time by themselves. They're your hardwired behaviours. That's what it's measuring. Does that make sense?
Why is it important to be assessed now?
Right now, because, what we say is people need to be a minimum of 16 years of age to be assessed. And it's important to be assessed right now because it's just going to give people clarity. We've got a lot of students that I have come to me from top private schools and universities that are still lacking clarity. And right now in Australia, we're heading towards the end of year exams. A lot of people will be making decisions around what are the best career choices for me? I have a lot of young people say, well, what's my lifelong career? And I say to them, look, the job market's changing. It's important to understand who you are at a deep level. This gives you a lot of information around relationships that'll help you navigate your way around potential future relationships. It'll help you understand where you're going to fit in with regards to the best work choices rather than getting frustrated and demoralised. A lot of university students or students in general get demoralised because sometimes they may start one degree and they find, no, I don't like that, and they've wasted 2 or 3 years, and then they change direction. So sometimes it becomes quite demoralizing and disheartening. So I say it's better to do these things whilst you're younger. I've had a lot of people come back to me, including CEOs of organizations, say, I wish I had done this earlier on in my life. Perhaps I would have made different life choices around selecting a life partner even. And so it's important to understand what career choices you can make, what's available to you now. And once you've done this, you don't need to keep resitting this type of assessment or process because of the accuracy level. And so if you were to sit this in 6 years' time, chances are your style wouldn't change. You might find some very, very, very minor changes in the scores, but they wouldn't be significant. And what we're finding is with jobs changing. So if we have a look at all the research that's happening in the job market, patients, we're seeing that jobs exist today may not exist within the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. So it's about setting people up for success early on, giving them those choices, eliminating that fear, that anxiety that people feel, that frustration or feeling depressed about what's going to happen in the future. It gives people a sense of direction, clarity, a lot more hope with a lot of the choices that they have before them as well. So that's why I say, look, it's important to do this sooner rather than later, because you don't want to be one of the statistics of 87%, whereby sometimes you feel like you've been stuck in a type of role for a long time, and then you don't have the confidence to try anything else. So the longer you sometimes stay in an organisation or in a particular role, you don't actually have confidence to move forward. And then what you have is a greater impact to the individual, where they feel depressed, demoralised, stressed. They're not happy with anything. It impacts their personal life. So, if they're married and they've got children, it starts to impact all areas of their life, all their relationships, because if you're unhappy at work where you spend most of your time, it's going to spill into your personal life, and then you've got a situation where people go, oh, well, I'm now in my 40s or 50s, and they feel despondent or they feel hopeless. So what's the point? What's the use? And then they never move out of current roles. And of course, it has a massive negative impact to organisations, because then organisations don't have the productivity or staff engagement that they should have. And so all of this starts to impact the bottom line to the organisation. You've got managers that are feeling frustrated with people because they're not understanding why certain staff members are not performing the way they would expect them to, because what they don't know is that a lot of people aren't aligned to the right role. So, when we have a look at all the statistics, and I've been following the statistics since 2010, they've pretty much been steady around disengagement in the workplace. And so this is really important for people to be able to navigate their way around life choices they make around relationships. It becomes more empowering for them to see how we're all different. And sometimes, we tend to take people's talents or behaviours personally. What this does is it takes away the emotional charge around how people behave around each other at work, because sometimes we say, oh, I thought my manager was nitpicky, or I thought my colleague was just being a pain, but now I understand they have a high need for accuracy of information. So what it does, it increases your emotional awareness, and we don't get enough of that in the education system to understand where these talents or behaviours come from, what they mean, how do they play themselves out at work. So for example, patients, we don't value things like compassion. And I say to anybody that has gone through this process, I say, wow, you've got loads of compassion. That plays itself out in a beautiful way in an organization for any type of people-related role, because you have natural patience. You have a natural ability to draw people out and encourage and mentor people. So what we find is that part of how we behave at work can disengage people and create more conflict, because the opposite of somebody being patient means that they're fast-paced, which means that they're a lot more task-oriented. So if you're interacting and communicating with your friends and colleagues and, they're talking to you and they want your attention, and you're sitting there and you're, moving your leg and your body language comes across like you're frustrated, or you're not really paying attention, or you're not actively listening, this plays a very difficult, how can I say, it plays a different role, I suppose, in a person's life, because it can start to cause a lot of relationship difficulties. So when we demonstrate to the individual, look, you're very low in your ability to empathetically listen. What does this mean to your relationships, your personal relationships, your work relationship? Because if you're displaying frustration, then you're not making the other person feel valued. And so that person's not going to approach you with any information. They don't feel comfortable. So chances are, eventually you're going to have a despondent person sitting in your team or in your personal relationship, or they'll just get up and leave. And that costs businesses a lot of money, because you spend so much time trying to recruit the right talent, trying to identify them, trying to get them aligned to the job, trying to get them to work in the best possible way. So, all of this costs a lot of money.
Why do you think compassion is disappeared in our community or workplaces in today's life?
I don't think it disappeared. I think, there's not a lot of value placed on compassion. And it's not true for all industries and job roles. So it depends. It depends what industry you're working in. So if we have a look at the process that I run people through, so we can say that not everybody is naturally born with compassion. This is it. So it's not that it's disappeared. It's just that it's not a hardwired talent. It's not a hardwired behavior. So people have to make a choice then. If you're in a position where you need to display compassion from time to time, then you have to learn compassion, which isn't easy, but it's doable. It's about valuing that talent, and it's about understanding, if I'm going to make that change, then it's going to take hard work. But if I understand the value, then I can do that. So I think a lot of compassion, from your perspective, you're seeing that a lot of compassion's disappeared in the community. I just think sometimes it maybe hasn't disappeared. It's just that it's not valued, and people feel like they've had to suppress it because they never felt it was valued in the first place, because we place so much value on technical skills. So, we placed a lot of value on getting good school marks, okay? We placed a lot of value on, maybe going to university or getting a trade and just getting out there and doing a job. We didn't place value on all these other skills, which are really critical and affect people's well-being at work, and ensuring that we have the right job alignment. And some people can't be compassionate in certain roles if they're not aligned to the right job, because if you're in a job which requires focusing on the task and not needing to consider the people impacts in the role that you're in, then, it means that you're not having an opportunity to display your compassion, because you have to work to a discrete deadline. So it makes it very difficult. But if you have somebody who's naturally compassionate, in a role which does mean you have to work faster and harder and focusing on the task and the goal at hand, it means that sometimes you'll see a peak of that compassion come through. You'll probably find that after a while, under pressure, they'll revert back to spending more time with their colleagues and worrying about the impacts of people. So some of these things are really hard to identify. Talents and hardwired behaviours are not easy to identify. A lot of people ask me today, they say, oh, come on, you must know who I am. You've been doing these assessments for such a long time. And I say, I'm not even going to attempt because what I see is what's on the surface. I've had a lot of people, friends and colleagues where I thought they were naturally compassionate, and as it turns out, they weren't, and under pressure and stress, you see a lot of these hardwired behaviours come through. They're not compassionate. They're more focused around the task, the result, the work at hand. They haven't got time to sit there and listen and encourage people. Okay, so that's why I say it's important to have your talent assessed now, so you understand who you are, where you fit in, and making sure that you're not being confused and mistaken for somebody else, because then once you get the job, you're expected to perform in a particular way. And if you don't, then there are consequences. It either means that, you get fired from your job, or it means that you get lost in the system and you stay in a job that you're unhappy in. And when you're unhappy, it starts to affect your emotional and physical well-being as well.
So, Gabrielle, are you telling us that half of the people around the globe, they are walking around being fake?
No, they're not walking around.
Yeah, because if they go to work and then they have to behave in a certain way, then when I meet them on the way, and then I'm like, oh, hello, and then they go to work, they don't even say hello to you. That is being different, because the environment they are in is changing their behavior. To me, that's what I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it, they're not being fake. They're not being fake. It's just that sometimes people aren't even aware how they're being impacted, how they're being affected. Okay, so if their talents or behaviours over time have been suppressed, then they're not even aware of who they were to begin with. Okay, so it just means that that they don't even know who they are anymore, because they've been so demoralised over time. So it's not that they're being fake. It also depends on that workplace culture. So if you're in a workplace culture where people are being hostile to one another, after a while you probably give up saying hello and being friendly. So that's why selecting the right workplace culture is really critical.
I know it is very critical, but Gabriella, sometimes you need a job. You have like 8 people to feed. You have another one the elderly to look after. So the first job comes, is the one you take. You'll be like, yeah, I'll just work through it. Even if I get depressed, I just have to work through it. So that's why I'm telling you, people are going around. They don't know who they are anymore. They are just walking around deadly. To me, that's what I think. So I don't know, from your side of point of view, when you do this assessment, what do you find out, and what are we expecting the next generation?
So what you can expect. So I always recommend, if you can do one of these assessments around, at least when you're 17 or 18 years of age, it's going to give you a lot of clarity. What you can expect is you're going to see all your talents and how every single one of those talents have been playing themselves out in your life. Every time people do this, they go, aha, that's exactly me. That's exactly how I behave. That's exactly what happens at school, around my colleagues, around my friends and family. Spot on. So they get a very, very good in-depth idea of who they are, and then what it does, it gives them a report of career choices, okay, ideal work environments, cultures, values, how they like to make decisions. Are they naturally collaborators? Do they like to be in leadership roles? Do they like to be in fast-paced environments, or do they like to work more with people? Do they like to be more spontaneous? What does that mean? Because with every talent or with every strength, there's a struggle. So you have to understand, okay, there's the positive of my talent, okay? But then if I'm around people who are opposite to me, they're going to struggle if they are opposite. So how do I modify that so I create better relationships at work? How do we create more respect and harmony at work? So that's what it helps me navigate with all my relationships at work, as well as selecting the ideal role for me without waiting years and years of frustration and taking a stab in the dark as well, and paying lots of money on courses. And, you know, sometimes parents get frustrated and they feel disheartened with their children as well, because they think, oh, my child doesn't know what to do. They're lost. I think they're going to go backpacking for a year or two overseas.
Wow.
So, yes, so what it does is it gives you all your career choices and helps you definitely navigate your way through different relationships. And like I said, it gives you all your strength, and then it shows you what do you struggle with. So I've had a lot of business owners, for example, who do these assessments, and they say to me, look, my business hasn't taken off. And I say, okay, you know, it's probably because you're naturally spontaneous. What does spontaneity mean? Spontaneity means that you're not focused. You don't naturally like to put a business plan together. You don't like to work towards discipline. You don't have a need for accuracy, data and information. So this is part of the reason why your business isn't taken off, because naturally you just want to be free-flowing and go with the flow. And then I look at their creative scores, for example. So if they're very creative, they're typically thinking of, you know, brand new ideas. And if they're innovative, you know, they're able to deal with a lot of abstract data. So I say to them, when you're very creative, you know, it's great that you're churning out all of these ideas, but sometimes you fail to implement and get things off the ground. So your business is not actually getting any traction. That's why you're not making money. So very quickly and succinctly, I have a look at the report, and straight away I can see how their talents or behaviours are playing themselves out in a positive and in a negative way in their life, whether it's work, their own business, and their relationships as well, because everything has an impact.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's very, very deep. All of a sudden, you know, people get clarity, awareness, and they change direction. I've had a lot of people make different choices about their businesses, change their website, they become more focused and more energized, and then they narrow down the services they're offering to people, because they realized, you know, when they're very spontaneous and creative, they've got so many ideas, and when they're communicating that with people, they're not very clear, they're not succinct, because the focus and attention is not there when you're very spontaneous. And you don't like planning, so you tend to wing things, so you don't research things very well at all. So that's how it plays itself out. A lot of people say, oh, I'm burnt out in my job. And I go, okay, let's have a look at why. I'll tell you exactly why you're burnt out in your job. You know, I had a lady who was exceptionally burnt out, and I said to her, were you in a leadership role? She said, yes. And I said, you're a natural collaborator, which means that you don't like to lead naturally. It's going to take you a lot of effort to be a leader. I said, you're not very confident. I said, you have a lot of self-doubt. So that's going to burn you out, carrying that energy day in, day out, having to lead and manage people. I said, because you're going to have to put on a front that you are confident. And I said, that is going to take a lot of energy from you. So, you know, and then I had a look at her other scores, and she's very reserved, so not outgoing. So that means she hasn't got a lot of energy to be around people and socialize around people. And I said to her, the fact that you haven't got a lot of energy means that you need to have a lot of rest time, or, go home and rest after work. That's how you balance your energy out. Because if you're in a leadership role where you're managing half a dozen or so people, I said it's going to drain your energy because you're not naturally good at leadership, and you're not naturally good at wanting to be around people. It's not where you like to spend your time. So, she agreed with everything, and, she's undertaken a new role now where, she's not managing people. And she said, you're absolutely right. She said, I have no desire to manage people. And she, she said they were ankle biters. And she said, I have no desire to be in a management role ever again. She said, I would rather follow somebody else. I'd rather have somebody tell me what to do at work, and then I follow.
Wow. Okay. Let's talk about hardwired talent and behavior navigate your job and relationship to success. Tell us more about your business.
Okay, so with my background, so I set up in 2009, I set up a coaching business using emotional freedom technique and timeline therapy, which is a neuro-linguistic programming technique. So I was able to work with people's behaviours at a deep level. I had all sorts of people come into my business, as I mentioned earlier, from corporates who were looking for ideal jobs, and I was only able to help them to a certain degree. They also came to me to help them find their ideal partner. So I worked with their subconscious mind, releasing negative emotions, negative belief systems, and we looked at what they thought their ideal job was. And so from there, I was able to understand patterns of behaviours. I understood that I could get to the person's core behaviours and release the negative patterns straight away with these tools and techniques I had. So a few years later, when I got introduced to this particular process of assessing people's talents, it gave me another layer of information, richer information. So today I'm able to navigate people around the right career path, but also what I do because of my background in coaching and helping people release negative feelings. The way I run my business is I'm able to bring all those skills and experience and background into how I conduct the debriefs that I do. So I unpack it in a different way. So I can go very, very deep with people straight away. So, for example, when I have a look at the talent they're born with, I say, gee, you're very confronting. How does this play itself out? Do you find that you're very argumentative in relationships? Okay. And they might say, typically they say, yes, I am. So the stronger the score, they say yes. And so what I'm able to do is I help them change their behaviours. I give them information and some tools and techniques to change their behaviours. So not only do they get an assessment, I give them all the other tools and techniques, because I also find out, why aren't you attracting your ideal job? Okay, so I ask them questions around what happened in the past. What were your work experiences in the past? Are you still angry with your previous manager or colleagues? Because that's what's stopping you from attracting a new job. Because when you go to interviews, although people aren't giving you this feedback, if you're filled with so much anger, sometimes, after an interview, that interviewer might be feeling, gee, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something not right about that person. So although you might even have the right skills and abilities and experience, you're not getting hired because people are sensing that there's something not quite right about you. So that's why it's important to release any depression, any anger, and feel that you're at your best before you start looking for work and before you go to those job interviews. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself on that merry-go-round where people go for 20, 30, 40, 50 job interviews and get nothing. Or they're the type of individual that are applying for hundreds of jobs online and they get nothing. And I say to people, it's because of your energy. When your energy is feeling low, it's very difficult to attract. So I come in with a different angle in how I deliver this information. So I'm not your typical career coach. I'm not your typical person that grabs an assessment and I just do a debrief and that's the end of that. I offer a lot more information that helps them set them up for their life.
Wow. Where can we find you to get in contact with you? And do you only work just for Australia or do you work for global?
No, I work anywhere in the world. You can give me a call on, shall I give out my number, Patience? Or?
Yes, please. We need the details. We need to get in contact with you.
Sure. So my number is 043 00 376 70. And because I'm in Australia, just add the +61 at the front. My website is www.freetoachieve.net. So that's freetoachieve.net. I conduct Skype sessions. I do a lot of work already around Australia via Skype. So the assessment is done online, so it's very easy. I just send you an email. All I need is your email address. My email address is Gabriella Salmon @freetoachieve.net. So I'd love to hear from anyone.
So, Clan, there will be more from Gabriella in the moment. If you are finding Gabriella's journey interesting and you are ready to hear more, come and listen to the full version of the interview at onlinesuccessjourney.com. If you are on Online Success Journey already, click on part 2 of Gabriella's journey and you'll get more tips to help you with your career, your job, the culture you will go in, and your relationships. Help you in the future. And don't forget, you can also access all other Online Success Journey interview podcasts on the site as well. That's a wrap, Clan. Remember, success is a journey. Patience and Gabriella.
This is not the end of the journey. We hope you've enjoyed listening to part 1 and want to be sure you know there is a second part to this and every journey podcast at onlinesuccessjourney.com. filled with even more success tips, uplifting stories, and even a bit of fun. There are dozens of episodes only available to the members of the Online Success Journey clan. Check out the website and click on Join the Clan for more information. Patience would like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and she has a free audio gift for you at her website. Go to onlinesuccessjourney.com for instant access to this gift. Of course, you know that listening to the journeys of others helps each of us chart our own path. So make sure you're subscribed to be notified as each new interview is posted. There are so many ways to stay connected to the Online Success Journey and to listen in. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we appreciate your help in telling others. One of the best ways to share the benefit you get is to rate and review it at Stitcher and other sites by clicking the stars or completing the ratings form, by clicking thumbs up and leaving a comment on YouTube, or liking and sharing the podcast on social media. To review the podcast within iTunes, simply open iTunes to the podcast, click on Ratings and Reviews, then write a review. On behalf of Patience, and until next time, thanks once more for listening. It is our hope that this podcast will guide you on your own online success journey.